Still back there, we should have brought it.
Oh boy, candy in front of you.
Okay, we're gonna call the meeting back to order. We're gonna move into the Auburn Day Shelter Overnight Shelter Project status update. But before we move into that, or while Dana's getting ready for us, both the resolution and ordinance are gonna come forward next Monday for a vote and discussion at the council meeting. Dana, it's your turn.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. Chair Trout Manuel, thank you. City Council, Mayor. Dana Hinman, Director of Administration. And we are finally at a point to be able to make some public statements about a recent partnership that we have been working on for probably going on about 6 months after the completion of the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness. As you well know, the #1 consensus item from the task force action items were around sheltering and expanding sheltering in Auburn. And we got a small start with that by allocating more funding towards our inclement weather emergency shelter. We were open more nights than we ever have been in the 5 years that we have had the shelter open. We did that in a couple of ways. The main way was sort of was relaxing the regulation that we had in place as to when we would be open. At first when we opened, it was just a flat below freezing, but sometimes 42 degrees and wind and rain is just as miserable as a freezing night here in Auburn. So we did expand those nights. Then we got to work on trying to provide something a little more permanent, a little more year-round. And we looked at a lot of different options throughout the city and had staff looking at locations, working with nonprofits, having conversations around the city. And what we settled on was as you know, Valley Cities, you may or may not know, Valley Cities has a parcel of land on their property on I Street, and they had been working with Kevin Snyder and Jeff Tate and their staff about possibly having a micro housing project on that plot of land. But we're probably a couple of years out from having it funded or having the capacity to run the program from there. So as we had continued our conversations about how we might expand sheltering in Auburn, we asked Mayor Backus to call Ken Taylor over at Valley Cities, and our staff suggested to us, as they were trying, in fact it was Doug Lean, so you know everyone's involved with this, economic development and human services and planning and public works and the whole 9 yards, and it's definitely been a team project. But Doug Lean came back in, he said, you know, I'm just driving through town, I'm seeing all these construction trailers around. Why can't we get a portable unit and work on something at least of a temporary nature to do some sheltering? So that conversation evolved into where we are now. And I can attest to the permitting process here in the city of Auburn, since we chose to be the lead agency on it. Kevin, your staff has been fabulous throughout, guiding us through our temporary use permit, which was approved and delivered to my office last week. And
how many days?
You know, before we even got into the permitting process, you have to do the planning process first. So we had to finalize what we needed to do, what we wanted to do, what was going to be available. It was brand new. It was an emerging idea. So Ingrid and her staff worked with us. Kevin and his staff worked with us about we had to know what the possibilities were first. What is permitted on that place? How do we get it permitted? How do we stay legal? Essentially.
Days?
From when we started, when we finally decided on the single.
Wrote the permit out request.
Well, I'd say it was probably 2 to 3. Kevin, you might, I don't have the timeline ahead of me,
2
but
to 3 weeks, and Spotlight took 6.
so from when we finally had the plans in place, the plans that were approved by Kevin's staff, and then moved into getting it permitted, because it was a temporary use permit, it had to go out for a 30-day comment period, responding to the comments, bringing it back forward.
So I'd say the pre-planning activities that Dana referenced took approximately 30 days of looking at the different options for the site, the layout. We had to look at how to get power to the site because the site is undeveloped, so it didn't have power. So we worked with PSD to look at that. That included Josh from Dana's team. So roughly about 30 days on pre-planning, and I would say approximately about 60 days, including the notice period that Dana referenced. We needed to, our temporary use permit process has different elements. One of them requires that we notify the public so that they have the opportunity to give input into the process. So we did deliver, as Dana indicated, we did deliver the approved permit on April 28th to her office so that it went through the permitting process. Temporary use permit processes typically, depending on the complexity, are 30 to 60 days, so pretty much in line with how we would treat any other party in terms of this was a what we call type 2 permit, so we typically process those in about 60 days. Remember, temporary use permits are a code authorized process, so the council or previous council has approved this language that allows for temporary uses of land with certain conditions, and that's what in this case that's what that is. We also did run a concurrent building permit process to make sure that we're doing proper placement of the building and that it's safe and sound being installed on the site.
I think you made the call to Ken in mid-January, Mayor? Something like
Our
that, I
emails
think.
back and forth after the tiny houses wasn't going to work out. That was over a weekend. Emails on a Sunday morning and afternoon when we declared we weren't willing to give up and we'd keep moving on it. Yeah.
So, thank you. So anyway, we do have the temporary use permit in hand. Now it's time waiting for Puget Sound Energy to schedule the temporary power to the site. And we are working closely with Debbie Christian from the Auburn Food Bank and Ken Taylor, Valley Cities, our running point on the operational portion of the sheltering. We have had conversations with Catholic Community Services, Mary's Place, WorkSource, and the list of conversations we've had around the operational plan of how we're going to provide not just sheltering, but wraparound services at the site, which is extremely important in any venture of this nature. Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. We we are working a little bit with AYR. So what we're asking some of our nonprofits is kind of to expand a little bit with their current services, so it can be a place where they know that they can come and gather and the outreach can take place in a more coordinated fashion. We will have coordinated entry for housing on site through several different organizations, and the overnighting portion. So let me go back. So the day shelter will take place in the temporary unit that we have leased that will be placed on the land. Ken Taylor, in his graciousness, offered their common area as the overnighting portion. And to start, because the Auburn Food Bank has been running our Clement overnight shelter, they currently have staff that has expertise in the current population that we have been servicing, and they will move that over to our sheltering operation. Right now, they are proposing a Monday through Friday operation. Would like to extend to 7 days a week, but it really just depends on the capacity of the staff and the funding that we are able to assemble going forward for the services and the overnighting.
Will we be using the Veterans Center also at the same time as we're using this facility?
No. The goal is to move that out of the Parks buildings. That I think Parks has taken an extremely generous, I mean, it's just standing it up has been amazing, the way that it has come together throughout the years, the 5 years that we have been running it. It's not the intended use for those facilities, so having a place where we can do sheltering with expertise all around is certainly a much improved
So
model.
Dana, why aren't we using our community, our churches, like Federal Way does? Federal Way,
It's a good question.
they use all of their churches to facilitate some of these night.
They did do that. That was through
shelters.
Catholic Community Services, and which is why we've had conversations with Catholic Community Services, because the Federal Way model is seasonal. It runs October through March. So they stopped that operation in March in Federal Way. And since they had available staff fairly local, they believe it's easier, and I am deferring to Ken and Debbie on how that might work if Catholic Community Services is going to run the overnight sheltering portion for us. We do have a budget number for them to do that.
The reason why, I'm sorry for interrupting you, the reason why I'm asking is because Holy Family Church, the Knights of Columbus, they've offered to do a homeless, night feeding and hosting the men or women in their facility. And so that's why they said they've never reached out to us. And so that's why I'm wondering if you guys have talked to all the churches in the community and get their feedback and see if they, I'm all about doing our city, having our city help out our own, instead of reaching out to all of these other entities that you mentioned Mary's Place.
Well, the outreach has been more of a, hey, we're opening this up. If you have resources that you can allocate to the center, we would love it. So our outreach to Mary's Place is, Mary's Place serves only families. And so if we have a family that comes into our shelter, Mary's Place is the best place for them to go. They can send an outreach worker out to us, make contact with that family, start getting those families connected to services and housing, which they have more access to. As far as the churches, no, Holy Family has not reached out to us, but I'd be more than happy to give them a call if they wanted to offer an expanded service. The one thing Catholic Community Services did tell us about the Federal Way model is that on paper, having the sheltering in the different churches around the city did kind of spread the work across many. As far as a sheltering operation to provide services, it's not the best model, because if you have the shelter in Church A, it's there for a month, and they have resources there and they're working with clients and they're maybe making progress with clients. Next month it goes to Church B. Not sure if that client's going to follow you to the next location. So it's not really a preferred model for sheltering, although it's absolutely possible. So we can certainly reach out to Holy Family and look into further services.
Wells and then Councilmember Wagner.
What's going to be the capacity?
Well, what we're going on right now is what we know from our current inclement weather shelter is the best data we have. We know that on average, there was probably anywhere from 35 to 40 people a night. It was as low as 20-something some nights, as high as 60-something in others.
Okay.
But they do have some, there's more capacity there. We don't know exactly what that capacity will be.
I favor this proposal because it has the services there and has Ken Taylor and people like him that can take care of this stuff. I would be hesitant to approve a church where it'd be run by volunteers mostly, but I guess the Federal Way model isn't quite that. They have one professional that is at the church, but I think having this at Valley State is just perfect. But I have a question for Dana. You got 0 for budget impact. I know this isn't free. You're leasing the building for one thing.
Yeah, no, it's not yet. So this is just an update on the proposed model. We will be coming forward with a budget number in the next budget amendment process for the City Council, as well as some of the we're working with Valley City's grant writing staff on seeking other funding from private funders as well. that, and what we don't want to do is, we went forward with a couple of grant opportunities, and what came back was, well, we're funding Valley Cities for this other thing, so do you want us to fund this one or that one? And we're like, no, we don't want to get in the way or obstruct current funding opportunities, so we're kind of treading lightly on how we seek the private funding.
So Councilmember Wells and then Councilmember DeCoursey.
Just to put in your file bank of ideas, I've seen in some of the other cities, our homeless have an issue with storage. And one of the nice ways to handle storage is to use those plastic waste management, big, huge things with a lid. Dumpsters, because they are pretty big, and you can secure them. And it might be something that as we negotiate a contract in the future, we ask for some provision where they could apply those so that as we come up with more sites, we could if it presents itself, we could use that for storage for people so they don't have to take so much of their stuff around with them on the bicycles and in the groceries carts. Another thing would be to work with Terry Davis with Comcast and Governmental Affairs and see what we can do to get cell phones for these people as they try to look for jobs and stuff when you're doing wraparound, see if you can't contribute that.
And that's what WorkSource has offered. Some of you may remember Laura Westergaard, who used to be the executive director of our downtown association. She is back in town. I met with her last week. She is more of an outreach capacity with WorkSource locally. And we had a long conversation about providing those kinds of services since they are right down the street from Valley Cities. The nice thing, going back to storage, is that currently the site where we will be placing the shelter has a large unused garage shed that's there that Ken has said could be used for storage for those who do come by the shelter, because the one thing we're very conscious of is the neighborhood impact. And we worked closely as part of the temporary use permit. Assistant Chief Pearson worked very closely with Jeff Tate and his staff on putting provisions into the permit regarding access to the site, trespassing, making sure that our police do have, and ensuring that it doesn't turn into a tent city or something of that nature, which we know that our community does not want. So we're trying to manage all of those things. And then the other nice thing about this site, Ken Taylor has offered up the use of their resource room in their common area where they do have computers and computer access, maybe actually drawing in people for services as they go. And there is also a limited laundry service and hygiene at that site as well that he has offered up on a limited basis. So, overall, it just, it's one of those things that seemed like a good idea. I met with Ken and Debbie last week as we continued to flesh out the operational model. And the thing that I loved most about what the both of them said is that they want to keep this as Auburn as possible. And we know that Ken and Debbie especially have great contact and great relationships within our communities of need, and especially in our homeless community after 5 years with the overnight shelter. And so this, I think, is going to allow us to sort of push this even further into, getting more help.
So depending upon this future, but depending upon the need, will we look at still maintaining the common building for nighttime services as well as the temporary structure we're going to be putting up, so using both for overnight shelter?
I would like for, I want to be diplomatic in my response here. I would like to use that for emergency purposes, and Mayor did mention that, if in fact we have a really big night in the winter and we have 70 or 80 people and they need a place to stay, yes, we will open up Veterans Building, yes, we will do those things. Ideally, this can hold the capacity that we need, and we won't need to do that. Just trying to balance, a building that wasn't intended for use for that is still an active building. It is a building that's rented out by the community for, birthday parties and anniversaries and other events. And on those nights where we are sheltering, sometimes it can be challenging of, trying to flip the building for.
Councilmember Wagner.
The Tacoma paper had an article recently about the Tacoma city evicting a lot of people, there's like 50 of them. And they quoted the homeless coordinator there in Tacoma, who you might want to talk to, as saying that he offered housing to all of them and only 3 accepted. Now, there's got to be reasons why that happens, and we don't want it to happen to ours, that we have 50 people that need it and only 3 are willing to move in. So I think it might be worth your time to call that guy in the city of Tacoma and say, why did all these people turn you down?
Councilmember Holman, did you have a question? Oh, I saw your hand go up. Any further questions? Yes.
Rich, to your point about the budget impact, the zero budget impact on here right now is because when council approved the, this was in the HUD, was this in the HUD? No, the general fund dollars. There was 30,000 in there for ideas related to the task force on homelessness. So we're still within that. But ongoing operations dependent on grants and things that we get, when that comes back, then there will show a budget impact if there needs to be a budget amendment for it.
Councilmember Wells.
I'm glad to see that you took one of the, or a couple of the ideas off the task force, 40 or 50 great ideas. I think that Councilmember Wagner asked if you could provide us with that list with the guesstimate of the cost items for the rest of them, so that as we look at money that's not going to be going to roads, we can look at some of the other costs, so that we can figure out how we can leverage and implement those supportive things that you'll need.
Any further questions? Thank you for coming and presenting this. This is pretty good and informative, so thank you.
I'm staying for the next one.
Okay. This is yours. So now, right here.
I'm staying. Joyce Scott's here too if we need her.
Okay, ordinance, Dan, could you please go over the ordinance 6652?
We actually have 2 versions of them. One was consistent with what you'd previously seen, patterned after Kent, and the other one, and Kent set in place a new code section, new chapter, and that was something that includes a lot of the same types of provisions that are also in the second version. The first version, again, was similar to what you've already seen. It sets forth a new chapter, unfair housing, for the City Code 5.40. The second version, actually, when we met, staff met, one of the issues we were discussing amongst staff was, do we really need to create a new chapter since we already have the business licensing mechanism? And so the second version was to take the same types of concepts that are in the Kent version, the City of Kent version, and plug it into our business licensing, since we already have a rental business licensing procedure, and that way the regulation could be enforced through business licensing rather than as a separate violation and a penalty. If our intention is to, and this is why we went this way, if our intention was to just try to really make sure that we're supportive of the concept of opposing source of income discrimination in rental housing, and essentially allowing people who have low income vouchers and things to use them, it would be quicker and easier to use the existing business licensing format rather than setting up a new process where we would end up having to conceivably cite somebody and charge them and go through the penalty process. Not only would it be quicker to use what we've already got, it'd probably be more effective because a business license would be tied to the enforcement mechanism. Other than that, they seek to accomplish the very same thing. We don't have a separate appeal process. It'd go through the licensing revocation as to the business license model. And I think that, maybe I shouldn't say this without getting Kevin and Dana both to agree, but I think we're on board with agreeing that the business license model has some advantages that make it worthwhile. Am I correct?
Yes, Dan, you are correct.
Okay, Councilmember Holman?
Thank you, Chair. I like using the business license, and this council spent several months working on that rental housing business license over the subject of student housing up at Green River. And it's a well-constructed ordinance, and we should build on it. This is a good place to, and a good mechanism to build on eliminating source of income discrimination.
Councilmember DeCoursey?
Two things. First of all, I definitely agree with Councilmember Holman on the business model. And just to thank you for putting in the total definition of the source of income itself. I think it's important to recognize, as we said before, this is more than just simple culture. So I'm glad we did that.
Conversation.
Any, Councilmember Wells?
On the business license, then goes out and enforces the business license.
Who does it?
Who enforces it?
Code enforcement. It'd be Kevin's crew, but they do that right now. Or, well, is it
Yeah,
code
they do
enforcement
it
or is
now.
it
They do it now.
Darcy? Somebody in Kevin's crew already does that, so this would just be another basis for action.
Just to add what the city attorney says, so pursuant to the Chapter 1.25, Title 5, which is the business license section of city code, is enforced by city code enforcement staff. And they do the procedural progressive code enforcement process that is specified in that section of city code.
I was surprised to learn that we have 3 code enforcers. And they spend about a third of their day, each one of them, tracking down and working to collect business licenses.
So we have when we go through the business license renewal process,
Yeah.
by city code, businesses are responsible for renewing. When a business does not renew, we go through a several touch process. We reach out, we place phone calls. Oftentimes businesses have gone out of business or relocated and we're unaware of that. And ultimately we get to a number, and then that is referred to city code enforcement staff. That is very time limited. It's typically just a small duration of their time, so it's not throughout the year. It typically follows probably, I would say, right about this time of the year, Deputy Mayor and City Council, where our code enforcement officers are engaged in helping to address outstanding enforcement issues around business licenses. Again, they're enforcing adopted city code, which says that to operate a business in the city, you do need to have a valid business license. So it's a short period of time, relatively. A lot of times folks either are new to the city or somehow fail to be aware, so it's not very time intensive, but there is a little bit of time that they do spend, in all honesty, but it's not too much time.
How is this related to in-home business? Like, for an example, a nursing, like a daycare or...
So for those that choose to utilize their property for rental purposes, we have a specific section of our business licensing that addresses rental housing. There is a separate section of our code that addresses more business-oriented uses of property. And then in certain circumstances, you have to get you have to get what's called a special home occupation permit. The goal is to make sure that it stays residential, so that you don't have a commercial business with all potential impacts occurring in a residential neighborhood. So for this purposes, for this particular item that's in front of the City Council, this is under the guise of, or an extension of our rental housing business license regulations that were previously adopted.
All right, thank you. Any further questions?
Well, I looked at the circle diagram that enforcement provided us a couple of weeks ago and saw that a significant portion of the of their time is spent on business licenses. And I think that if we're going to have business licenses, we do need to enforce it. But I was surprised at the amount of time when we only have 3 code enforcers and we have such big problems out there, you know, with some of the campsites and the other things that they are involved in. Is that the best staff to use for building code enforcement or for building license enforcement?
In my opinion, yes. For business licensing, again, current code specifies that that is an area of responsibility for code enforcement, which is part of my team's area of responsibility. Again, it is, well, it does have some impact. I would say the impact is limited. It does not extend throughout the year. There's a time-limited arena when those are referred to. We work very strenuously to get those numbers down as much as we can. We have roughly, including rental housing business licenses, roughly 4,000 active business licenses in our community. So we're dealing with a relatively small number annually that we have to engage with code enforcement to go out and secure action. So I feel comfortable that is a reasonable use of their time, and it does not impact them throughout the year. So other areas of impact, Deputy Mayor, I think that they are still able to respond to those. Remember, some of these other issues you mentioned, encampments or things like that, also have other departments within the city involved, and sometimes take several steps to get through before you can see action. Might involve legal, might involve police, so sometimes they're working on them even though it may not be apparent because they have to go through several steps.
So you said there were 40,000 licenses or 4,000?
4,000 business licenses approximately in the city.
Have you ever thought about the concept of if you file for your business license on time, it's like $1, and then if you don't, it's $200 or some other monetary motivation, so we don't have to spend $35 an hour or more employees driving out to try to collect this?
If that's something the council is interested in right now, I'll remind you that the current business license fee is $50, all business types. It's a flat fee. So if the council felt it was appropriate to look at that, that's something we could look at with you. My experience is incentives and or penalties can sometimes work and can sometimes not work depending on the circumstances. So I think before I could give you a more conclusive answer, if it's something, you know, those are adopted into our master fee schedule that you review annually. I could certainly look into that a little bit further, but I think our business license process works pretty good. We get a really, I would say, typically over 90% response out of that 4,000 annually. So it's a very small number that we're having to deal with. And in the context of rental housing business licenses, that is one of the areas that we tend to get the slowest response. And it's not unreasonable. A lot of time folks are either new into it or they may or may not immediately follow up, but we get pretty good response when we do reach out to folks.
How much notice do you give those owners?
So we provide, our business licenses are annual, so they begin January 1 to December 31st every year. We notify them beginning in late November to early December. We send out a notification to all parties, and we provide both online as well as in-person renewal. So you can go online and make it more convenient and pay online, or you can do it in person. We get probably right now, I'd say probably about half and half in that regard. Half either do it in person or send it via mail, or they go online.
And I think just one more comment relating to compliance on business licenses is Doug Lean, we're working on the opposite of that, of kind of incentivizing having a business license. Doug Lean has been working with Paul Haugen and the IT staff on creating an online searchable database for Auburn businesses as part of Doug Lean's Buy Local program that he has partially funded with a grant from the Port of Seattle. And the goal of that is to pull data from our business licensing into a robust front-facing online system where if someone wanted to come in and search for a business in Auburn that sells a particular kind of widget they're looking for, they can type that in, they can find an Auburn business that does that. And, you know, the goal being, let's put some value behind that $50 so that our businesses can feel like, you know, they are getting something from that. And, you know, Paul's been wrestling with the data, and his staff have been wrestling with the data, and we've been hopefully have it up in our business incubator. We have a beta test going right now, so hopefully we'll see some good progress there as well.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Kevin, is there any penalty associated with late payment?
Currently, we don't have a late fee. What we do is a party, if they fail to renew for some reason, they can either have their license either suspended or revoked. But currently, there is not a financial late fee penalty.
Like our utilities?
Correct.
We have late fee on that.
It was several years ago, I don't know if some of the council members remember, we did actually have a conversation with council about potentially changing the fee structure, looking at raising the fees, possibly adding the late fees at that time, and it was appropriate because it was still coming out of the Great Recession. I think the council was comfortable with just keeping with the flat $50 fee. So right now, council member, there is nothing that gives us the authority to charge that late fee.
Is the $50 fee for our city, is it similar around other cities, or?
I don't have direct information. I can look into that. I will say that it depends on the intent of your business license program. Some entities have a business license program that is built around basically different levels of registration and licensing based on your type of business or number of employees. Some use it as a way to, we use it as a registration to have awareness of the businesses and to gather some basic information about our businesses so that we can help serve them better. Some do it as a full-on permitting licensing process and charge a higher fee scale. So I would say, without knowing exactly that, you know, there are probably other entities like us around, but immediately around us, I don't have an answer to that.
I would like to see us have a briefing on license fees and how and what do we do in the region, other cities, just to so we can maybe refresh it. I don't know. But
Maybe we can put that on the matrix.
yeah.
Councilmember Holman.
Thank you, Chair. Can we kind of get back to the focus here on fair housing practices and income discrimination? We're wandering a little, good topics, but we're wandering a little far afield here.
Well, that's the whole purpose of study sessions. When you wander, you learn something.
Okay, like I said, good discussion, but we're moving a little far afield here.
Any further discussion?
May I inquire if this might trigger some discussion, just because I don't want to pick wrong, but would you want both ordinances or just the business license model to come back?
How does,
I would say just the business license model myself.
I agree.
I agree.
you have consensus?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, we're now under other discussion items, and I think that we'll need to look at the council matrix and see on this matrix where we would like to add business licenses. Which, is it orange, yellow, green, blue, or light blue? Would that be under,
Business.
Under under
Six.
municipal services.
Which color is municipal services?
Orange.
Orange, okay,
I mean, that's my suggestion.
okay. Then we'll add it in there.
Would add it under the municipal
Also,
services.
I would, under business shopping carts, that's where I'd put it, but yes,
also, I would like to add under municipal services, orange.
Are we sure municipal services is orange?
Yes.
Or is that orange?
Yes.
Okay, okay,
I would like to add another topic under orange,
yes,
the orange men.
okay.
Council,
Oh, that just dawned on me.
council, chambers, security, discussion.
Okay.
Council, chambers, security,
Got it.
discussion.
Okay. We're still under other discussion items. Anyone else like to have something added or changed from the
We
med?
need to Add our $20 card tab fee ad hoc committee on here.
Okay. Okay.
Under what?
It's gonna be at the top,
At the
one
top.
of the ones.
We have that ad hoc committee still in effect.
Okay.
Oh, we didn't put a date. Oh, well, when's the next, okay, when's the next municipal services? When's the next municipal services?
Look,
The date always go on.
I'll put the key back in there next year.
Yeah,
Okay.
June 26th.
June 26th, thank you.
Okay, if we
June.
could put,
Okay.
would, Mayor, would your staff have enough time to bring it back in June?
What is it that you're?
Council chair.
Business license?
Oh,
Yeah, there should be time, I would think, yeah, Kevin
Okay,
said.
and then council chambers security discussion?
What is that one?
Well, it's, how secure are we in this facility? I think we should need to discuss it.
Secure, you mean during a study session or?
During any.
Any session, okay.
Okay, well, we always have
I know. I
an
know.
armed police
But
officer
I don't want to
here.
discuss it here, I want to discuss it in
Well, I just want to understand fully so we can have something prepared,
a,
so.
okay.
So what is it
Maybe-
that you're looking for?
Maybe we need to have,
A police officer by the door.
by the door or other mechanism like they have in the,
Or maybe a metal detector. I'm just brainstorming.
well, yeah, and that's what this would be.
Yeah. Or a place where they could check their weapons.
I don't want us to get going down a path where we cannot do that, but that is very restricted. Courthouses can do it, city halls cannot.
Well, I think a discussion would help us understand a little bit. Yeah,
That's all,
yeah, okay. Got it down. Anything else? Let's look at new business. Any new business? Yes.
And we talked about regarding potentially doing something related to helping those who may be undocumented.
Okay.
Perhaps we should have something on here to
Yes.
put us in that direction.
Which color is
Social
Yeah,
services.
that's
social services?
yeah.
Green?
Green.
Okay.
There's
Thanks
a-
for reminding us, Claude.
I think, not that we're all totally confused, but the orange, the green, or the gold and green, or gold, orange, or orange. Maybe just, we need a key here just
I'll
to
bring
help
the
us
key
out.
back.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
At the
thank you.
They got a
bottom,
minute.
Oh,
yes.
okay, thank you.
Just added that.
Any other new business? I think this is the time, the process that we're using now of dealing with the matrix at the end, and we'll have a key, is a good way to deal with the matrix. If there's no, yes, Councilmember
Also, I
Pelosi.
think that since this is a council matrix and since we have chairs under each of these, I think the chair's name should be here as well.
Okay, good point.
You might say chair / staff lead or something.
Yeah.
council member so-and-so / staff lead, I don't know.
Or put down here, the orange is such and such and
Yeah, I'll provide
something.
I'll provide a key next
A
time.
key.
With the potential dates for the year, or not potential dates, but the dates for the year. And I can certainly put the chair, but what do you mean by staff lead?
Well, no.
That's already
You
on.
don't- Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't
it's
need
it's
that.
on there.
Whoever,
Oh, who's, okay, I understand.
whoever the item is for.
Also, on study sessions, I would recommend, like we have health, human service discussion items, - council member TM. She leads. And
Yeah.
I think whenever we have a committee chair, it should be noted who that committee chair
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
Just so people in the
Yeah,
audience.
and it keeps us straight,
around.
too.
So I can certainly work on that. That is a template change, and so I'm not sure with our current service
well,
provider.
You always figure something out that works.
So I
You're a
will do
temp-
my best on
You're a
that.
template gal, you can figure it
It's not our template.
I think that it's working out well to have the sandwich. I think
Yeah.
that none of us are
Absolutely.
dying. The sandwich does get rich here on time. So, and if you get a chance, they're not extravagant. It's a sandwich and a bottle of water. Be sure and thank Antoinette. She's coming up with the menu and doing a nice job. Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.